Good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to the March Dalim Tips and Tricks webinar. This is the makeover edition. We had some issues with the GoToMeeting the other day, so we're going to record this thing. And you see already on my screen, it doesn't look like I have Keynote open in the full screen view, which I don't because I've had some issues recording when I switch back and forth. We're going to do it this way. It's just Keynote. We'll get it out of the way in a bit. The subject this month is, can you use an iPad to work with ES? Or maybe more accurately, if you do use an iPad with ES, what can you expect? What works, what doesn't, what'll make you happy, and what'll make you crazy? This was prompted by a question we had recently from a customer who used the old Dialog Touch app. They wanted to open a file in that app and see a revision and also see notes on one of the earlier revisions. And the answer to his question is no, it doesn't do it. And furthermore, Dalim's response was that they're no longer developing that app. So my suggestion was, why not just connect to ES with a browser and use it the normal way from your iPad? And so that's one of the first things we're going to look at. And, we know that the environment we live in these days is dominated by mobile devices. People want to work from where they are with what they have. And if that means you're riding on the train and you want to whip out your iPad and review some images in ES, then more power to you. As I mentioned, we have these existing solutions, the Dialog Touch app, which is a bit long in the tooth. The DVL app, which is basically flat plan based. It's usually used if, you've got a book or a magazine and you want to view the whole thing. Although it can be used if you have created a DVL file in ES and then you just download it and you can store it locally without having to have access to the ES server. Or what we're going to do today is, why not fire up your browser on your iPad and go to ES. Obviously, we're going to look at how usable it is. Some things you're going to say a solid yes, and other things you're going to give thumbs down to. As far as what I'm working from a iPad Pro 11-inch, and I have the smart keyboard attached, because when you work from these things, especially a smaller screen like this, screen space is a premium. And the keyboard is pretty handy as well, because you got all the keyboard shortcuts, or many of them. And if you don't have it, if you're ever working in ES and you have to click at something and type something in, the on-screen keyboard pops up and you lose some of that precious real estate. So the keyboard's pretty handy. Can you replace Dialog Touch app? I say absolutely you can. And as far as the DVL app, that virtual book stuff you'll see is pretty much fine from the iPad as well. One thing I found in working with it is you really have to rely on smart views. And there's a new option called the selection mode that you pretty much have to have, I think. And you're going to run into some differences in the HTML5 viewer that we'll go over. Pain points, and there are a few. One thing I've noticed is that ES5 and ES55 actually behave differently, and kind of counterintuitively, ES5 is better. We'll look at that. These items you see below are pretty much what I'm talking about: resizing frames, double tapping, drag and drop's always fun. Color accuracy is an interesting question, because I've read more than a few things in terms of reviews of the current displays on iPads, and they get extremely high marks, notably in terms of color accuracy. These things from the factory very consistently will show a delta E of about 1, maybe a little over 1.1. That's pretty good. Does that mean I'm suggesting that you should use it for color accurate work? No, I'm not, but it's not bad. There is a utility on an iPad from X-Rite that allows you to calibrate. Put your spectrophotometer on here and calibrate it. The limitation, though, is that once you've done that any files that you view must be viewed within their specific app to get that color correct display. So you could run that routine, but as soon as you jump into ES, it's not going to do you any good because you're viewing through the browser. And there's a couple other items on here, but let's just start looking at what we can and can't do. Let's start with the old school dialog TouchUp. If you've seen it before, it looks pretty familiar, right? It shows you all of the projects in which there are files that are ready for you, the user, to approve. And you click on one of them and you will see the files. Now, for some reason, we got a bunch of squirrels in here. I happen to know that this one is a black and white of the squirrel, but there's another version of it that's color. So this kind of addresses the issue that was initially brought up with, can I see a revision with notes? You can't. And I think also the other thing you'll notice here is if you've ever used this app, notice how long it takes to refresh and update to the high-res display. It's not horrible, but if you're used to the HTML5 viewer, you know that it's probably 2 or 3 times snappier than this thing is. That took quite a while to work. I mean, this app has all the other goodies, you know, you can paint on it and put your notes and all that stuff, but it's really not being developed anymore. And the question is there a better way? I think there is. So the first thing we're going to look at is within ES, I set up a smart view that is, to my mind, mimics the behavior of the dialog TouchUp. This, as you know, smart views can have a filter set up so they show only the files that the user can approve. That's what we have. And obviously you can go through here and choose your customer, choose your project, and now we're looking at those same files we were just looking at. First thing you'll notice is, and I'm using the pencil, you tap, and let's say I want to select another image. You know, maybe I'll hold the command key down on the keyboard. That didn't help. How about the shift key? No, that didn't work either. So you'll see that there's an issue with selecting multiple files at once. If I tap in the top right, this is a new option that they've added to the smart views. It's called selection mode. So now I can select as many squirrels as I want, and we'll get that. We'll put a duck in there too. The keyboard shortcuts work. I just hit V to view, and I'm up in the HTML5 viewer. All of the appropriate tools are in place, as you see, along the top and the bottom, right? Make my notes, draw some more ridiculous circles on there. But you may notice as well, though, there's a couple things you're used to seeing that aren't here. You don't see the bookmark panel down the right-hand side, because I did open 4 files. And you don't see the, trying to get it to show me the notes panel on the right. That was just kind of scrolling, but that's not there either. And we'll look at some variations on how to get those back in a few minutes. But the initial point to make, you know, the dialog touch thing can't see revisions. Well, this is the ES HTML5 viewer, so I can sure as heck, you know, double tap to zoom up on this guy, pan and scroll, and, you know, with my keen color sense, I can tell one of those is in color and one of them is black and white. And, you know, you can do anything you're used to doing in the ES viewer. Go to the side-by-side mode, right? All that good stuff. So that works fine. You do notice, though, that let's go back here. This wasn't actually showing me, though, the notes from the first file. Notice those notes? They weren't showing up earlier. You saw it was only showing those ridiculous drawings from this guy. So in this mode, you have to actually view the earlier file to see his notes. I'm not sure if that's a showstopper, but it is something to be aware of. Now, the other thing is I opened 4 files. Where are the rest of them? Well, if you look at the bottom, you see one of four, so I can tap through. Although they're all squirrels, it's hard to tell if I'm looking at different versions, but you can see these are the different images, a bunch of different ridiculous notes. If you have notes on them, you know, since I don't have the note panel on the right, you figure, how can I delete a note? So if you just hold down on it for about a second and a half, it'll bring that delete guy up, and you can get rid of these things if you need to. Delete him too. So that stuff all works. And you know, you got the notes tool works fine. You got the densitometer. You can bring him out and move him around and get a reading. So that stuff all behaves as we would hope it would. The one thing you'll find that doesn't work is if I had a page up that had some text in it, the text extraction tool just doesn't work here. Another thing you'll notice is if I hit the ICC settings up here, it will not let me select them. So in this mode, there are certain things you sometimes expect to see in ES that you can't get at. And one other thing I'll point out is, again, if we're trying to mimic the behavior of the Dialog TouchUp, you know, since these are my files that are on approval, if I select him and approve him, he should go away, which he did, because again, this, as soon as you approve it, it should no longer be filtered as a non-approval file. So I think this is a pretty good replacement for the Dialog TouchUp. Now let's look though now at some different behavior in the viewer. I'm going to switch over to Chrome. Now the first point I want to make is what I'm going to show you right now is not necessarily unique to Chrome, but one could be fooled into thinking that it is. At least I was when I first started playing around with this. Yeah, we'll stick in this job. Let's select. Let's go to that multi-select thing again. We'll grab a file, another file, and one more. And let's open them up. V to view. There's my bookmark panel. That's pretty good. There's my filters for my notes. So your initial reaction might be, oh, that Chrome is a lot better. I got all the good stuff. In fact, I could even go in here, choose my ICC settings, and maybe I want to put a paper sim on, and you see that works. So that looks like good stuff. And you can say, well, forget Safari. I'm just going to use Chrome because it's got the goods. I'll show you a couple limitations. So I try to draw. Notice I cannot draw with the pen tool. All it's doing is moving a screen. Let's get the densitometer out here. I'm going to grab it and try to move it. And notice what it does. It just jumps down here to the lower right. And once it gets there, you're not going to get it to budge. And often what it'll do, it depends on where you click. I kind of missed. Often it'll give you a note in the middle, or it'll refuse to move at all. But the densitometer is really a non-starter in this mode. So I think the limitations here are, there's a few. Can't draw. Densitometer doesn't work. And I'm not going to do it, but it will not go to full screen mode. Well, I'll try it. Hopefully it won't blow up this recording. Yeah. The only browser I've found so far that pops up the full screen mode in the viewer is Safari. I've tried Safari, Chrome, Firefox, and Opera. Now, I don't know if this is some nefarious behavior by Apple or if it has anything to do with the way Dalim did this, but if you need full screen mode, you can only do it in Safari. So now, let's explore, why did Chrome look different than Safari? Is it really better, or, you know, so it got some extra sauce underneath? And the answer is no. In fact, the first time I ran across this, I was convinced that it was much different. But the problem was I had inadvertently told it to request the desktop site. So right now we're looking at the desktop site. If you tell it to request the mobile site, what you're going to see is everything that we just looked at in Safari will return as the behavior. And the one thing I've noticed as well is when you switch from the desktop to the mobile, at least in Chrome, the first time you open a file, it gives you this weird looking display. Why it does it, I don't know. But the first time you open it, it'll do that. But then when you open it again, it'll come back to normal. But look at what we have now. This is what we had in Safari earlier, because Safari was requesting the mobile site. Now we have it in Chrome, and we basically have the same thing we looked at earlier. Double tap to zoom, scroll it, move it around, right? Pinch, all the good stuff. And again, all that it's lacking here are the panels. So you really have to kind of decide for yourself which is more important. The panels on the side, missing the densitometer and the drawing tool, or this mode in which you don't have the panels. That's kind of a hard one, actually. I kind of like the panels. And there is, at least for me, let's go back to the desktop site. Another important thing to keep in mind, actually, this is the mobile site. That's a multi-page PDF, right? Well, if you've got a multi-page PDF, it's pretty handy to have the panel down the right, down the left, so you can pretty quickly hop from page to page and get the guy you want, right? Can't do it this way. So if I go back here, though, I don't remember if you go back to the desktop site if it freaks out on the first display. Let's try one to see what it does. He behaves. So the point is, multi-select mode, multi-page PDF, and a bunch of singles, right? So if I open those up, now I can move through this, right? I can collapse, as you would expect, the multi-page PDF, or expand him to see all his pages, and that works perfectly. So that, again, is the kind of thing where you almost kind of have to answer for yourself what works for you and what doesn't, and maybe you would actually hop back and forth between the two. And, one thing I should have said right at the outset is in terms of what Dalim is or isn't doing, there's really not any real special mobile sauce going on here, other than the HTML5 viewer, which we see there's a different differentiation between the two. The rest of the interface, as far as I know, behaves almost identically, regardless of which of these options you're choosing from. And I'll also mention, if you do like Safari, you can get it to display the desktop site. You just hold down on the refresh button there for a couple seconds and it'll pop that guy up. We're not going to do that right now, but you could if you choose to. So I'm going to work in Safari for the rest of the way. Let's sign out and let's go to a more normal user profile and show you a couple other things that you may or may not want to do in a, for lack of a better term, I'll say in a normal mode, right? Can you do things like uploading files into ES? Let's see. Let's view the list view here. There we go. It's a little too big. Upload. It's the HTML5 uploader. I could take a photo of myself, but I don't think anyone wants to see that. Or you could browse. Now in iOS, I think it started in iOS 11, the iPad has this Files app. So I can browse around and I've got it configured. If I have files in Dropbox, local, I got something in Google Drive. I thought I had more than that in there. Let's go back. Yeah, work files. I guess I forgot to put any in there, but let's grab that file. Can I upload him? Sure I can. There he goes. There he comes. Now, one of the limitations is, and actually now that I think about it, I think those files were over on Dropbox. Yeah, there they are. The problem here is, let's say I wanted to select 4 of those. there's no way that I know of to do it. So you're kind of reduced to having to go, one file at a time. And if you got a bunch of files you have to upload, I don't think anybody in their right mind is going to have to roll that way. So I think this sort of thing is just in a pinch. If you need to upload some files, yeah, you can. They already came in. It's pretty fast. You can download files too. So, maybe you got to get your hands on a file to look at it, find out what went wrong with it, right? Just go do everything you would normally do. And what you'll see it do here is it'll open it in a new tab, and then you can just tell it where you want it to go. So for my money, it's easiest to say save to files, and then you can choose, we'll send it to Google Drive and dump it in there. So now you downloaded it, you can grab it, do whatever it is you may need to do if you have to get your hands on the high-res file. Let's close that tab and go back where we were. So I mentioned earlier at least to my money, the reason you really need to concentrate on working in smart views. Here's really the main reason from my point of view. We're in a project, and we have, as you note at the top, the document tab selected, right? So in the normal document mode, I can select a file. I can see all the goodies on the right. I can see the metadata, the milestones, and the approval logic and all that stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. But I can't do what I did earlier. I can't select more than one file. So, I'm trying everything I can think of right now, Shift, Command, Control. It won't do it. And to me, that's a fairly big limitation, because I think it's pretty common. People need to view multiple files at once. But if you're in the project viewed mode, there's no reason you can't still work with a smart view. You go to your browser tab right there, and now the browser tab can be configured with the smart view of your choice. There's my multi-mode. Actually, we'll turn them off, because you can still look at all this stuff in ES, right? I mean, in a smart view, you can still get at that stuff. But now I can get to my multiple select guy and get as many as I want and open them all up again. And I won't bore you with doing that again. So that's why I think smart views are pretty important here. And, the other thing is it's often, depending on who's connecting to your ES server, you may want to have a very simplistic display. Maybe you go with, if you're licensed for it, you go with one of those desktop views, right? So you can, and actually this one is, for my money, a little problematic, because I should have had the folder tree on the left should have been squeezed off a little bit. But I think you can see that from something like this, you get a very simple stripped down display. This is for somebody who doesn't need to use the flat plan, because in the desktop view you can't use a flat plan. But if somebody just need to see files and approve, mark up, all that good stuff, and not have to be worried by any of the other clutter or extra stuff that may be in ES, the desktop view is probably not a bad way to go. And if you haven't seen demos, you haven't worked with it before, it is highly configurable. What I'm working with here is just a fairly standard out-of-the-box setup, but you can move these things all over the screen. You can put the menus down here on the bottom if you like that sort of thing. So you've got a lot of options to work with to make a very clean, stripped-down interface for somebody who's working from an iPad. So now let's get to the stuff that is not the greatest things that you want to see. You got to show the bad with the good. So here's a few things that you may have noticed this already. I'm not sure. Let's go into my Smart View. So I want to get into that Documents folder. Now, if you've been watching closely so far, you notice I've been constantly expanding things over here in the left-hand panel, right? That's because if I double tap on that documents folder, it will not let me in. It just will not give it up. That's frustrating. The other thing that you commonly might want to do is you want to move the panels over a little bit. Maybe this panel on the left. I want to squeeze him over. And you can see I'm selecting him, but he will not move. I can't squeeze him over. I can put him away and bring him back out, but I can't control the size. The same with the guy over here on the right. Can't do it. And this is where we get into the difference with ES5 and ES6. Here's an ES5 server. I wonder if I can double tap and open. Yes, I can. I wonder if I can move that thing. Yeah, I can change the size of the frames too. So this is, to say the very least, a fairly frustrating development that the older version behaves a little better for us than the newer version. Having said that, I've looked at ES6, and in ES6, those things do work. In ES6, you can actually double tap. You can resize the frames like I just did there. And I really have not had a satisfactory answer from Dalim yet as to why 5.5 does not behave that way. Maybe one day we'll get the goods from them. Let's go back to our ES5.5 server. And let's look at a couple other things that are less than satisfactory. Let's go to a Smart View, this guy. This is the Smart View that was used earlier when we were talking about the dialog touch stuff. And let's say we look and say, you know what, the people who use this need to be able to delete files. Probably not true, but let's make believe that you want to let them delete files. So I need to edit my Smart View. Let's go do that. Now, one thing you've probably noticed is that navigating through all of the panels here is very snappy. It's really not a problem. Here comes the problem. Let's go into Actions, and let's get the delete button. And we grab them, and we go, yeah, you say, this is working great. Let's put that guy in there. And he won't work. And what you're seeing right quick is drag and drop is a drag. It will not work. And it's not just restricted to something like Smart Views. Let's say you were, sitting around in, I don't know, let's just choose one of these job tickets. And, let's say I need to drag anything, any metadata. Doesn't really matter what it is. You'll see the same thing. Again, it looks like it's going to work. You get the green plus sign and everything. Doesn't work. So you can see already that you're kind of hamstrung with certain administrative things you may want to do. Job tickets, Smart Views, workflows. Workflows are a bit frustrating because there's some things you can get away with to edit and others you can't. So for instance, I could, I guess it doesn't matter. Oh yeah, there's a digital delivery step. Let's select him. So, you can edit this stuff, right? At least I think you can. I've done this before. It's very temperamental in that you have to hit it exactly in the right spot. Yeah, that works. Let's try that again, because I could have sworn I've done this before. Yeah, and then it pops up all my different destinations, or you can type stuff in. I mean, you can see you can move the steps around. You can get in here. That was a close call. Yeah, I could pop a JavaScript in there, so I can edit an existing workflow in certain restricted ways, but you cannot drag new tools in. You can't hold the tool and kind of drag out and do it, because if I hold it, it really just drags the tool. So you're pretty limited in workflow editing. Let's go up here and say you're messing around with your customer settings. I mean, some basic things you can do. You can create new users, assign users to existing customers. You can create groups. At least I think you can. I think I've created groups. Yeah, that's a group. And just go through and add all your different users. So that works. That's not bad. Working in customer, you can set up new templates, right? There's nothing in here that requires any dragging and dropping, so you can create a new template, but you will discover that if you go to an existing template, you say, oh, I think I need to edit that. Double tap, nothing. Or you can hold down on it, and I've tried everything I could think of, but you cannot open an existing template and edit it. So that's another strike against full administrative stuff on here. One last thing I'll show that I was under, when I thought of this, is that, oh yeah, this will work perfectly. This is a good thing to work with. Let's say you need to do a little troubleshooting and get in here and view some of your logs. If I go to the event log, I said, it doesn't look too bad. And, you know, maybe I want to filter on ES, and I want to filter on some of the file input rules, right? Stuff that came in. So I want to check this guy and see which rule he matched. And yeah, I can't get it, right? No go. Double click, won't open it up. So that can be a little frustrating. One thing I forgot to mention that just occurred to me, I'm not sure if it's the biggest deal, but you know, if you do need to view your job ticket information or you need to edit metadata, that's all available. So I think you can kind of see that from the point of view of a user who needs to do a lot of basic functions, this works pretty well. It's from the administrative part that it starts to fall down. Having said that, I just remembered one other item I should point out. That is working with a flat plan. Let's put both of these up here. So I want to drag a file out of the flat plan. I think you can guess what's going to happen, and that is nothing's going to happen. Because again, we're talking about a drag and drop thing, right? He's not going anywhere. And the same thing happens with, if you want to swap pages, right? I want to drag him into here. And if you were looking, you'd see I've got the pencil on here and I'm trying to drag it. Doesn't work. So you really cannot manipulate the flat plan. One of the last things I'll point out, now that we're talking about the flat plan, is the ability to work with the virtual book or the flippy book. Because just as in accessing ES from your laptop or any other browser, from here you can get a hold of that virtual book and fire them up. So for something basic like this, you do not need the DVL app. Just connect to ES, find your job, and tell it to view the virtual book. It's all there. You got the, well, it's no different than being in ES because I am in ES. If you've never noticed this, once you're in here, you can say, you know, I gotta run off and do something, but I think later on I'm going to launch the DVL. So what you can do is park that thing in the DVL app. If we look, let me go back. Yeah. I got it. Oh yeah, here we go. If you look, it puts him in our little bookshelf here. So if I come back to this later, I can launch him. And frankly, I'm not sure this is a new feature in here, but when you're in the DVL, see the little D there? Click the D. It opens it in the HTML5 viewer. So you have full access directly from there to the viewer. And I think I might be logged in as the wrong user, but if I wasn't, I could approve and reject directly from here. click the back arrow, go back to DVL and continue reviewing my book. So you have the flexibility of being able to work with the virtual book either from the DVL app or just hang around in ES and do it from in there. Let's go back to Safari. And I think that we'll call it there for what we want to cover in this webinar. I think this probably lends itself to a lot of different questions now as far as future developments, and if you're going to be attending the Duo in the US, I think this is a question that is more than appropriate to ask the Dalim reps about. It has been said that they're using a new framework in ES6 that is supposedly more mobile friendly, but from my perspective, that's a fairly vague statement. It doesn't tell us anything specific about how the experience in ES is going to change for the better when you're working from an iPad. There's obviously room for improvement, but I think there's also some pretty good things in here that you can perform if you just sit in your chair and fire up your iPad and hit ES. We know that we do these things, at least we attempt to do them, the third Wednesday of every month, assuming the person doing it knows what he's doing and can share his screen out. I believe we'll have one in April. It'll probably be a follow-up from Duo. That's what we often do. So we'll see you at Duo in Nashville, or we'll see you on the next webinar. Hope this was helpful, and have a good day.